One week I was talking to Kathy, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Any questions before we get this train moving?" Did you see that one? So I put a little clip in there of a train. Uh,
I'm going back to your guys's earlier ones and starting to go through them, so it'll be a long time before I get to last week's.
Yeah, well, last week's I think was especially good, because and I was aiming it mostly at Phil because Phil's relatively new, right? So I wanted to fill him in. I
You
wanted
wanted
to
to pick on
I
him?
wanted to fill
Yeah,
Phil.
I just felt totally picked on.
I wanted to fill in, so but so that's why I thought it was. Oh, now here's somebody here. Maybe she's a friend of yours, Wanda. Wanda, she's a friend of yours. I'm going to let her in, so she'll be here.
Yes, awesome. She's
Great.
my my new coworker that I've known for a while.
Oh yes, good. Yeah, you mentioned you invited some people to come.
And I gave her a copy of your book so she could do some studying.
Oh, great.
Study.
Well, just so she knew what kind of woo-woo she was getting into.
Yeah, I think the book is good. The purpose of Mind, Time, and Power is to present this new model of consciousness that your mind is a time machine. Right?
Hi, Wanda.
Hello.
Hello, I'm so happy you're here.
Are you going to show us your face, or are you gonna?
Yeah, let's see ya.
I'm actually at my family's house, so we're all just gonna listen if you don't
Oh,
mind.
no, Phil's disappeared too.
Phil's like, if she's not gonna show her face, I'm not either. Bye.
Right.
Hang on, I'll start my video then.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, Phil's back too.
I just wanted to turn out that light behind me.
Oh yeah, that's a good move because it was shining in the camera there. Yeah, so basically last week was about how the imagination works, right? And so yeah, so Mind, Time, and Power is the idea behind Mind, Time, and Power is to present this new model of consciousness that I developed, and I developed it on my own after having a dream that I had when I was a kid that I couldn't explain. So I had to put this model together, or at least I wanted to put the model together, so I could explain what happened with me, right? I had this dream, saw the future in advance, and the future started to come true, and it's still coming true. And so this model says that what we call memory, which we tend to think of as like a recording of the past, and goal setting or planning or visualizing the future is exactly the same thing. And so to put this model together took me 20 years. And so I'm talking more or less for Wanda's benefit here, just because she has the book now. And so I started to write this book in 1980 and couldn't explain it, didn't have the language, didn't have the background. And so I went to university for 5 years and eventually wrote this book and published it in, I think, 1999 was the first time. And then when I came back from China, which was in 2009, I lived in China for 4 years. When I came back from China, I decided to publish the book again and start doing workshops and public speaking around the book. And it was then, 2010, that I discovered, much to my surprise, shock at the time, that scientists now have discovered the same thing. They call it mental time travel. And basically what they're saying is that the default mode of the mind, or human consciousness, what they call the default mode, is what they now call mental time travel, which is that memory works in the future too. Well, when I first had this thought, that didn't make any sense to me. It was like, well, a memory is like a recording of the past. Well, how can you have a recording of something that hasn't happened yet, like the future? That didn't make any sense. So, like I say, after years of research, I finally came to the conclusion that memory is not a recording. A better way to think of it is it's a connection. And so when you think about thinking of the past as connecting to the past, then of course it makes sense that thinking of the future is connecting to the future too. And so what I've come to believe over the years is that this is what thinking is. When you think about, oh, I got to go to the store today and buy some bread and milk, what you're doing is you're connecting to the future when you're in the store. You sort of go, oh, I have a picture of myself going to the store, and I can imagine myself, walking down the aisle and picking up that milk and a loaf of bread, right? Well, that might be an image in your mind that just lasts a second or half a second. But to my mind, what I'm saying is you're actually connecting to that future you that's in the store buying the milk and the bread. And the next time you go to the store and buy milk and bread, remember doing that, and you can remember being at home deciding to go to the store to buy the bread. So in other words, you can imagine yourself going into the store to buy the loaf of bread. That's thinking of the future. That's connecting to the future. That's what you might call a goal or a plan, right? Or an idea. And when you're in the store, deciding to go to the store because you looked in the fridge and you had no milk, right? That's the past. So we would call that, I remember being at home and making this decision. But the problem is that the only words that we had to talk about this were words like memory, which we tend to believe is a recording of the past, and I'm saying it's not a recording of the past. It's a connection to a past time, right? And when we think of the future, we tend to go, well, yeah, that's kind of a goal or a dream or a plan. I'm going, like I'm planning a trip to the UK in a couple of months. So, I'm thinking about that now. And so my mind is spending time in the future, right? Thinking about that. And so what the scientists now say is that I was right with this model, which of course made me, feel good about all the work that I did to put it together. Now they still don't really understand it, as far as I can tell, because they're scientists, so they're sort of looking at numbers and graphs and charts, and they do experiments on rats and things like that. So even though they've proven now that mental time travel is real, the easiest way to think of it, in my opinion, is to think of it like daydreaming, because that's really what it is. I mean, when you think of going to the store to buy a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk or a quart of milk, do they have bottles anymore? I guess they do. That's like daydreaming, right? But the difference between a daydream and a goal or a plan, let's say, is that you focus on it, you decide to do it, and then it becomes something more real. Then you just, okay, I'm going to go to the store and buy the milk now. So you go and you buy the milk and you bring it back home, and now here it is, right? So your life is now changed because now you have milk. Before you didn't have milk. So this model of the mind, to me, it's the most powerful concept I've ever heard about. Certainly, it's the most powerful thing I've ever come up with. And I really think now that that it's one of the biggest ideas of the 21st century. And most people still don't get it because it's new. But if I can make a prediction, I think over the next 50 years, certainly before 50 years, but 25 years, the idea that we create the future and also we create the past with our thinking, the way we think about it, that's going to be the big thing. And it's already starting to transform psychology. There's a new psychology now called positive psychology, which is about what do people need to do to feel better and be more successful and get over the depression and stuff like this. So, because this idea of the future, using the future as a resource, using the past as a resource, connecting with your future self, connecting with your past self, that's now sort of in the psychological jargon. A lot of people talking about that now. Even though when I started in 1980, nobody was talking about it that I knew. So what I'm saying is I've got 40 years experience of working with this, whereas most people, even if they've heard of it, they've just heard of it and they just sort of go, well, daydreaming, yeah, okay, past, future, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But they don't understand the power of how to use it. So what these calls are about, and what my book is about, is basically how to use this talent, this skill that we all have, right? I mean, if you want to, probably a perfect example would be to go to school and learn something, right? Kathy's taken some courses, learning stuff, Phil's now taking some courses through his church, right? And, so when you go to school, let's say you embark on some kind of a degree program or a certificate program, you kind of see yourself in the future. Oh, yeah, I can see myself doing that. I want to become a massage therapist or something, right? So that's an image of you in the future, right? Well, then you go to school and you study and you learn all kinds of stuff and you practice, and you learn a few new skills. And then a couple of years later, now you're a massage therapist, right? So we've all experienced this. But the general image that people have of the past and the future is that the past has happened, the future hasn't happened, so we don't have any information about it. And the past is the thing that's caused the present. So virtually everybody accepts the idea that I am the way I am because of what's happened to me in the past. Most people don't even question that. All of psychology, as far as I know, is based on that idea. You are the way you are because of the experiences you've had in your past. Well, what I'm saying is, once you understand this model of mental time travel, you realize it's not what's happened to you in the past. It's the way you think about what's happened to you in the past. Right? I mean, Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And a lot of people say, various self-help, new age, empowerment authors and trainers, they say things like, it's not what happens, it's how you think about what happens. So one of the things I was going to do today, and I mentioned this to Naomi last week, was, working with a negative past experience, maybe something that you regret, and trying to think about it a different way so that it doesn't feel bad anymore. It's not so negative, it's less negative, it's more positive now. And so this, to me, is one of the most powerful ideas that comes from this model, from this idea that we're equally connected to the past and the future. Because what that means is that the past is still there. And because it's still there, I can connect with it through my imagination. I can reframe it, describe it in a different way, tell a different story about it, change the feelings about it, and then suddenly what used to be a negative thing that made me feel bad, now it doesn't make me feel bad anymore. It's just a neutral thing that's happened. Or maybe it's even a positive thing. If I say, well, what did I learn from that? What can I take that as a valuable lesson that will help me improve my life into the future? And if I can think of some lesson, that'll help me avoid making the same mistake in the future, then it becomes a positive thing. And of course, this is not new. I mean, you all know what I'm talking about, right? The idea of kind of changing the way you think about something so that rather than being a burden, rather than weighing you down with bad feelings, maybe it boosts you up with positive feelings. So that's the purpose of the book, and that's the purpose of all the work I do, and the purpose of these calls here is basically to kind of talk about that, answer questions about it, help people figure out how to use it, right? So, any comments there?
Nope. It's a journey.
Makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense, yeah. And like I say, it's being accepted now all over the world, as a fact, mental time travel, right? Though all the techniques that we're talking about, at least a lot of the techniques, people don't appreciate because they haven't thought about it. So Naomi, we were talking last week about maybe looking at some past experience that makes you feel regret. Have you got an experience like that you?
Well, yeah, I've not got an antidote for the thought. I mean, I don't know the reframe.
Well, that's what we'll work on. That's what we'll figure out. So what? So what's the experience? Can you talk about it? You can be general. You don't have to be specific. You can be general about it.
It always goes back to the mother guilt type of thing. I didn't select the really good quality daycare, just convenient daycare, and I think, I don't know, not that there was trauma at the daycare, but it's like, oh, I should have done something different for my kids. And I think there was just a couple of bad experiences, but nothing, I don't know. It's just a few things, and details don't matter, but I don't know how to change that experience for them or for myself.
Okay, so your kids were in this daycare for like a long time or a short time, or?
Yeah, well, one specific one was like for a full year.
Okay.
And my youngest he just hated that daycare, but I didn't listen. There could have been stuff going on, I don't know, but I didn't listen. I had to go to work. It is just, chin up, kid, you're going, there's no choice.
Right. So
and I don't think that was the right way to do it.
Okay, so you said mother guilt.
Yes.
Is that a thing? Mother guilt? Yeah. I mean, it's guilt, right? Feeling guilty.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, we all have those, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you rather feel about it?
Well, I'd rather feel that I didn't have that experience, but that it literally didn't happen. I'm not sure if my connection is very strong.
Yeah, it seems to be breaking up, but anyway. So how would you rather feel about that? Like, what's a good feeling?
Well, a good feeling, I don't know, because the experience happened. I mean, that's what I'm grappling with.
Yeah, I don't mean a feeling about that. I mean, just generally, what is a good feeling that you like to feel? I can suggest some.
Go ahead.
Well, what about feeling proud?
I mean, I'm proud of my kids.
Okay. So your kids turned out okay?
I'm very proud of my kids.
Okay. So you're proud of your kids, and you're the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that you're proud. This is a question. I don't want to put words in your mouth or ideas in your head, but So I'm assuming that you feel proud of the way you parented your kids, generally speaking, right?
I suppose generally speaking, yep.
Yeah, because you said you're proud of your kids, right?
Yeah, either they're accomplished in spite of, and they could very well be accomplished kids. I mean, they're accomplished in their professions and stuff, and in their relationships, and but it could be in spite of versus because of. So
That's true. Okay, so if I say to you generally, how, considering you were parenting these kids for, I mean, you're still parenting them, but for let's say 20 years, while they were growing up, right? And how do you feel about your parenting skills generally for that, 20-year period?
I mean, I probably wouldn't have done too much different because I didn't, I don't know.
Okay, so
As a working mom, you always think, it's again that guilt thing was always was I there enough, or then you just don't know.
so you could have done better, right?
Yep,
You could have done worse.
yep,
You
yep.
didn't abuse your kids too much, I hope. I'm
Nope.
assuming, right?
No.
Maybe once in a while, hey,
Nope. Well, yeah, they
Um,
needed a swat in the butt every now and
Oh,
then.
absolutely. Absolutely. So generally, then you feel I'm suggesting, if I'm reading you right, on a scale of 10, that as far as your mothering skills went, you're a 6 or a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or something like that, right?
I suppose it depends on the day. Yep,
Yeah,
depended on the
exactly.
day.
Exactly. Well, that's true. I mean, that's a good point. It depends on your mood, right? Because if you want to beat yourself up, you have certain things that you can think about to beat yourself up, and make yourself feel bad. But so generally, it's a positive feeling about your parenting skills, right? Now, can you think of any other instances that you did something that maybe ended up in your kids getting hurt or something? Like maybe you went for a walk and one of them fell down, skinned his knee because you weren't paying attention for a second?
Oh, yeah, sort of. I mean, yeah. I mean, one kid was riding a horse and he fell off, and I wasn't right next to him, but he could have changed. I mean, I could have told him, no, don't. When you fall off a horse, don't put your arm out because it's going to get broke, which it got broke.
Right, right. So you could have done that, like in retrospect, which is 2020, right?
Right.
You could have said that, but you didn't. Now, do you feel guilty about that?
Not really, no.
Okay.
It's just a learning experience.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the difference then between that and you putting them in the daycare? The one, something bad happened, but it's like, well, it's not really my fault. But the other one, you feel like, oh, it was my fault, and I feel guilty. So why are they different, those two situations?
That's a good way to look at it. I don't know why they probably are that different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it's probably,
So when you,
I don't know.
yeah, well, it's something to think about, right?
Yep.
It's actually an important thing to think about. It's like, why is it that your son broke his arm one day because of something you did, i.e., put him on the horse, right? And yet you don't feel guilty about that because you say, oh, that's just something that happened, right? But the decision to put them in the daycare, you think of it differently. So think about it, try and figure out, well, what's the difference? Why do I think it differently? Why do I feel guilty about the one and I don't feel guilty about the other one?
Well, it just seems like a daycare, it'd be more anguish on, the mental piece of it versus the the physical broken arm.
Yeah,
The physical broken arm just heals.
but your kids have healed from what you said earlier.
It seems like it, but
So
yeah, I
they're
guess. And I've never really sat down and spoke with them, and maybe that's what I should do.
okay. Yeah,
Just
that's an
like-
idea, right? That's an idea.
I've just assumed that it would. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you know what
I don't know.
assuming does, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's probably a good point. You know, that would be a good thing to talk to them and say, hey, you know, you remember when I put you in this daycare and blah blah blah. And I always feel guilty about that because it wasn't a very good daycare, and I felt like maybe it wasn't a good thing for you. And you know, who knows what they're going to say? They might say, "What? I love that daycare. I still got friends that I met in the daycare." You know, so I mean, you don't know, right? They might have loved it.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying, you know, that you have this feeling connected to that, you know, this meaning that is something
Mhm.
about, I didn't pay enough attention. I could have found a better place for them. I could have put them in a different daycare, you know. So you feel guilty about that, right? But I think, and I can ask you about this, you know, it seems to me that if you're a mother, one of the trickiest things to do is to find good daycare for your kids. I mean, it's an ongoing problem for people all over the country, right?
Hmm.
So this idea that you did, you know, you made some decisions that in retrospect they might, you know, you might have made different decisions, but of course you can't change the events of the past. You can change the feelings about the past and the meaning of the past, but the events,
Hmm.
you know, they're physical, so they're going to stay. But
Hmm.
so what I would, I mean, if it were me in this situation, I would try and think of a number of situations like the horse incident, where something bad happened that you just accept as, oh, okay, well, that happened, you know, I don't feel bad about that. Try and, you know, if you have 4 or 5 of those events that you can think about that you don't feel bad about, in a sense, that's a negative event that you haven't taken on any responsibility for feeling guilty about, right?
Hmm.
And so look at that decision with the daycare as just another one of those decisions. Could have been better. You could have done it differently. You could have warned your son, hey, if you fall off the horse, don't put your arms out, you know. But you didn't do that, right? So you made a choice, and I'm assuming it was the best choice you had at the time.
Yeah.
Right? And
You don't know. Yeah.
yeah, you know, I mean, obviously you didn't do it thinking that it was going to hurt your kids, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, you made you made the choice, the best choice that you could under the circumstances, shall we say, right?
True. True.
And so, but now we have this 20-year period that you generally feel good about. You know, raising my kids until they became adults. I feel, you know, 6,
Mhm.
7, 8, 9, good about that, right? So
Mhm.
put that decision about the daycare in the context of that 20 years of raising these great kids that you're really proud of.
Yeah. Good framing.
Yeah, so it's like,
I'll
you know,
work on that.
yeah, so, you know, we said a couple things there. Number one, generally speaking, over the 20 years of your raising these infants, you did a good job and you feel good about it. So put it in that context. And in that 20-year period, you know, there was this situation where one of them broke an arm, and this situation where you think maybe you put them in the wrong daycare, and this situation where maybe one of them got hurt, or, you know, something else happened, and you just, you know, you've accepted those as just life, That's life,
Mhm.
you know, and see if you can't kind of smooth out that wrinkle there in the daycare situation. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because you have a few
Mhm.
wrinkles in that 20-year period. You know, if you look at like a big bed sheet, you know, there's a bunch of wrinkles in it. You can iron them out. One of them may be a bigger wrinkle than the others in your own mind. And I think talking to your kids is a great idea. You know, how many kids have you got?
2 boys.
Okay, so that's 2 calls, right?
Mhm.
2 phone calls, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Say, hey, I got a question for you. Do you remember that daycare, that you were in when I've always felt bad that I didn't put you in a different daycare, and I just want to let you know that, I feel a little guilty about that, and, I hope it wasn't a negative experience for you, because I feel like I should have done a better job. And see what they say,
Mhm.
They might say, yeah, I always hate you for that. But more than likely they're going to go, hey, it was fun. I learned how to count. I learned how to play ball.
Yeah.
I used to, they had dogs come in every once in a while that we could pet. So I got really positive memories about that daycare. And then you can stop making yourself feel bad.
Yeah.
So think about that, contemplate that,
Yeah, I will.
and you have access to that meditation
Yep.
called Changing the Past, right? Which, if you don't know where it is, you can find it on YouTube. It's on my website. I think it's called The Secret of Changing the Past, and it's just a little meditation that's like 5 or 10 minutes. You just go through and you kind of do what we just did. You sort of see yourself in the past, and you look at it and you try and feel good generally about the job you did as a mom. But I think I mean, I've never been a mom, so I'm guessing, but I would guess that probably every mom, I would guess, has a few of those experiences, that whenever they think about it, they kind of go, ooh, I feel bad about that.
Mhm.
Because I certainly do, as a parent, right? I mean, I have memories about my kids that I could feel bad about. But the good thing, well, I guess there's a couple of good things about this. Number one, it's nice to know that it is possible to change your feelings about it. And basically, the process is basically what we just
True.
did. Compare it to a few other incidents and see if it's why is it different. Maybe it's not different. It's just maybe you had a particularly bad day one day. You were feeling depressed. This is also possible, right? And so you chose that particular decision and beat yourself up about it, and it kind of got locked in there as something to feel guilty about, when in actual fact, it's not a big deal, right? And see if it doesn't change the feeling. And the thing that I found is that because the past is always there and the future is always there too, that any negativity that we can remove from the past improves our life, generally speaking. It improves our present, it improves our future too. So working on those negative past experiences and shifting them around so you don't feel so bad about them. To me, that's one of the best things you can do with your time. Spend 5 minutes a day for the next week thinking about that. And if it shifts, then boom, it's shifted permanently, right? The meaning is changed. And then ever after, whenever you think about that, you're going to feel less bad about it.
Thanks. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Anthony,
Yeah.
what about that meditation you did with us, the I Feel Proud one? Is that someplace? Because that might be a great one for Naomi, considering that that's the feeling she's going for.
Yeah, that's another one. You know, I think you have that one too, right? I feel proud.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So
Thank you.
so you remember I did that thing one day about can you paint a chair red? So that's a physical thing, right? You take a chair and you paint it red. You know, you buy paint and you paint it red. So you're changing the physical thing. But the same thing applies to the non-physical, like these experiences, right? So for example, if you think, so here's the sequence, right? Number one, make a list of a few things you really feel proud about. And think about those for a few minutes so you get the feeling of I'm feeling proud now in your body, right? And then sneak in that thing with the daycare. Like add that to the list, you know, and see if you can't take that proud, the same as you take the red paint, you know, and you take the pride feeling and you include the daycare with it. Because I'm pretty sure that there were worse daycares that you could have put your kids in.
True.
I mean, I would guess, you know, just as a, just as an assumption, right? That even though you feel you could have done better, it was a choice you made, and your kids are great, and you're proud of your kids, and you know, like you said, nothing, as far as you know, nothing bad happened there. You know, nobody got their arm broke in the daycare.
Right. No.
Any other comments there?
No. Thanks. Yeah, it'll be a good challenge.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, like I say, you know, 5 minutes, you know, spend 5 minutes a day for the next 7 days. That's half an hour, basically 35 minutes. And you know, you might find that it just dissolves when you just look at it a couple different ways, you know. Another thing you can try is to imagine that a friend of yours comes to you and says, "Hey, Naomi, I want to talk to you about something. I feel so guilty about this thing that I did." You know? And she tells you the same story that you just told me, and you talk to her and say, "Hey, that's okay. Don't worry about it." You know? Like give her some advice, you know what I mean? Just changing your perspective on it that way, sometimes that can shift it too, right?
For sure.
So last week we were talking about the imagination, and so I want to continue a little bit about that. I'm going to share my screen here. So episode Woosha Joe 59. So this is my model of remembering, right? Or thinking. We have the inner self and the outer self. So the outer self is physical. It lives in the present, lives in the now. And the inner self lives in the inner world, uses the inner senses and moves through time, whereas the outer self lives in the physical present, uses the outer senses and moves through physical space. You can see that, Phil?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the model. That's my model of, basically that's what thinking is, according to me, right? You have this inner you and you have the outer you. The outer you, of course, lives in the now, in the physical world, uses the physical present, uses the physical senses, the outer senses, and the inner self moves through time. Sometimes it's in the past when you're thinking of the past, and sometimes it's in the future when you're thinking of the future, you know. So that's the model. So I'll get back to this in a second. So this is thinking. right? This is the same thing, the same picture, more or less. So the inner self uses the inner senses, the outer self uses the outer senses. And of course, the imagination is the connection between the inner self and the outer self, or the inner world and the outer world, right? And so when you close your eyes and you're in a pitch black room and there's no input, then basically you can't see or hear anything or maybe feel anything if you're like lying in bed or something. But you can think, so you use your inner senses. Generally, you can use your inner senses easier with your eyes closed and you're in, kind of a dark room or something like that. But the truth is, you can use your inner senses anytime. Like right now, my eyes are wide open, right? And we have a cat here. I don't see the cat at the moment, but I can imagine looking at the cat and seeing the cat on the floor, right? You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So that's using my outer senses and my inner senses at the same time. Because I'm looking at the floor, and when I look at the floor, I can see my coffee cup on the table and the computer, and I can see the floor, and I can see the furniture on the other side of the room. But I can imagine the cat there. So that's using my inner senses and my outer senses together. Now, I think that that's basically what happens to us constantly, that the inner senses are always working to some degree under the surface. This is what I was calling before, the metadata of your daily life. It's the feelings and emotions and the memories and things that are going through your mind, but you're not really paying attention to it. It's kind of in the background. So that's the inner senses. But specifically, when we're thinking of something, Phil mentioned contemplation last week. So contemplation, typically you close your eyes and you're breathing slowly and you calm down and you're thinking of something internal. So that's contemplating, right? When you're remembering, it's the same thing, except the past self is in a different time zone now. Like you might be remembering, well, that story that Naomi just told about the kids in the daycare. So that might be, 15, 20 years ago or more. Same model, same thing, right? And then in the future, you're planning, you're connecting to your future self. So the model that I used before was a phone call or maybe the Zoom call, right? So the inner self is the other end of the telephone. It's talking to your friend on the phone, only she's in the future now or she's in the past, she's in the east or she's in the west. She moves around physically, and your inner self moves around in time, right? So here's another model. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's a guy with a drone, right? So the drone is your inner self. It moves around. So you can think of your inner self, your past self, your future self. Think of it as a drone. Here's another drone. This is a spacecraft that NASA launched out to look around Jupiter, right?
Saturn.
Or Saturn, yeah, sorry. My mistake. Sorry, Saturn. Here's another one. This is something that's crawling around on Mars. Mars rover, right? So those, to me, they're all perfectly adequate, perfectly good models of how your mind works in the past and in the future. It's like your inner self, your inner senses, they're like a drone, or they're like a phone, a friend that you're calling on a cell phone, So the beautiful part of this model is that it's simple, right? This is what thinking is. Thinking, oh, Wanda had to go. Nice of her to come anyway. I'm glad she came. And thanks, Jessica, for inviting her to come. So this is a model of thinking, right? So remember last week I was talking about this model of epicycles, right? Now that model was super complicated. It had all these different cycles and cycles and cycles and cycles, none of which existed, but people used that model. They created that model because it explained the way they could see the planets moving across the sky. Sometimes they were moving the same as the stars, and sometimes they backed up. And the reason they back up is because we passed them. You know, the Earth moves faster than Mars does. So if you're looking at Mars against the backdrop of the stars, and then you pass because we're going around the sun, right? And we go faster, so it's like being in a car. You're passing another car. It looks like it's going backwards, right? That's why Mars looks like it backs up sometimes, because the Earth goes past it. And so that's a really simple way to understand the way the planets move. No need for epicycles. And so what I said last time, I'll remind you, and you'll see it when you watch the video of last week, that I said that there's a whole bunch of epicycles that psychology has created, or maybe it's, you know, don't have to blame psychology. I guess it's just people trying to explain things, that they come up with these stories to explain things, why somebody is happy and the other person isn't, or why somebody is successful and the other person isn't. And so they say, well, the person has talent, or the person's lucky, or they have, you know, they inherited something from their parents, they got better genes, right? And I'm saying all of those are untrue. They're just these epicycles. They're just things that we've made up. Even though we all think it's true, right? Oh, so-and-so has talent. Well, yeah, but he also practiced for 30 years, you know. Tiger Woods has a talent for hitting a golf ball. Oh, yeah, well, he's hit 5 million golf balls in his life. You do something 5 million times, you'll get good at it too. So that model, now there's a principle in philosophy called Occam's razor. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know the meaning.
Well,
remember the meaning.
Occam's razor, it pertains to this exactly, right? Here we have these two models of the universe. One is like super complicated, and the other one is real simple. Oh, there's the sun in the middle and the planets going around in circles. That's it. That's simple, right? Where the other one has all these epicycles. Oh, the sun, you know, the sun's going around the Earth, and the stars are going around the Earth, and the Earth's in the middle, and, you know, Mars is going around the Earth, and the sun's going around the Earth, and we have all these epicycles and everything else. That's really complicated. So Occam, he was this philosopher from, I think, the 12th century, and he came up with this thing which is called Occam's razor. And Occam's razor says, if there are two theories that both explain some phenomenon, one is really complicated and the other one is really simple, the simple one is better. I'm not sure if it says, you know, the simple one is true and the complicated one is false, but that's basically what they're getting at, right? That the heliocentric model of the solar system that says the sun's in the center and all the planets are going around, that's a simple model. Anybody can understand that. The other one was so complicated because people believed that the universe was created by God and therefore it's perfect and everything had to work in perfect circles. And, you know, the earth was the center of everything because God made the earth and made people, and so therefore the earth was the center of everything. Therefore, the sun had to go around it. Well, that's really complicated, you know? No, the earth is spinning, and that's why it looks like things are going around. And, you know, the reason the stars sometimes, or the planets sometimes back up is because, hey, we're moving faster than they are around the sun, and they just look like they're going backwards because we're passing them. That's that. So that's Occam's razor. So I feel like my model of what thinking is way simpler than for people to say, well, you know, you have something from the past, and that's causing problems in the present, and you can't do much about it because you can't change the past. Well, I'm saying you can change the past, as we just talked about with Naomi, right? And it doesn't, you know, it's not always the case that you can shift it in 5 minutes. But you think about it, you know, think about it over and over again, and you'll come up with another way of thinking about it, and talk to your friends about it, talk to your kids about it, Naomi, you know, and it may shift. And when it shifts, like, whew, then that burden is gone, right? And you can do that because the past is still there. The past hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. People think, oh, the past is gone. It's not gone. It's still there. So, any comments?
Well, I loved your illustration of the cans and the string, the communication between your inner self and, your current self and your imaginary, your inner self.
Right.
Reminded me of being a kid, and we actually did that with a friend.
Yeah, I know, I did too.
And you wax the string.
Oh, okay. I didn't do that.
And then you could speak very quietly. You know, maybe he would be 50 feet away, but you could speak very quietly, and we'd speak quietly, and we could hear each other. Through that, even though we couldn't hear, with our other ear.
Yeah, I think the string has to be tight, right?
Yeah, it has to be tight.
Because if it's loose, then it doesn't work so well. But I remember doing that too. Yeah, well, so to just build upon that again, that thing that I mentioned a minute ago, like if I'm looking at the room here and I'm imagining the cat sitting on the floor, then my inner self and my outer self, in a sense, they're in the same place, right? So those two cans are like touching almost, right? But if I think of myself getting my university degree, which happened like in the early 90s, 1991, I think, then that's like 30 years ago. So that string is long now. It's 30 years long. Because I can remember that. I mentioned that last week, walking across that stage, right? So that's a past success, getting that degree. And so I was thinking, because I was editing the video this week, so I watched it a few times, right? And I was thinking of a sort of an analogy of that. So that's a past success, getting my degree. That's one of my past successes, right? I can remember that. So I thought to myself, well, how long did it take me to get that degree, like to walk across the stage and get the degree? Well, let's say it took a minute. It probably didn't take a minute. I mean, it might have only been 30 seconds from the time they called my name to the time I walked up on the stage, walked across the stage, got my degree. And then I remember I turned around and looked at all the people, because it was in this gymnasium, right, where they had the ceremony. So I got my degree, I turned around, I looked at everybody, and I went, click, because I wanted to remember it, right? And so I remember it. And so that's one of my past successes. So I thought to myself, well, if that was a minute, so let's say, for example, I were to take like those dominoes, little blocks, right? Well, let's say the domino was an inch, and I were to put a row of dominoes next to each other. So 12 dominoes would make like 1 foot, right? How many dominoes would there be between now and me getting my degree? Anybody guess?
Millions.
Well, there's a lot, right? I figured that if it was an inch, equating to like a minute, right? That it would be around 16 million minutes, which turn it into inches, that equates to 248.9 miles of dominoes laid side by side, right? But I can remember that one, right? So that's like a little white one, let's say. If the dominoes are black, then, that one, let's say it's a white one, or a golden one, maybe it's a golden one. And it's sitting there, it's like, 248.9 miles away. But I can connect with it instantly. In my imagination, I can remember that. And as soon as I remember that, instantly I feel proud. I can feel it in my body right now. Hey, that was I'm proud of myself for doing that, right? So that's how fast the imagination moves. It just, doesn't take any time at all. So your past successes, I've used the analogy before of like looking for your past successes in your mental landscape of the past is like finding an oil well, right? I use that analogy. So like a company, like an oil company will look around, and they'll look around for, all over the landscape to find oil. And when they find a spot where they can drill down and get oil, then they can siphon that oil out of the ground and sell it and make money and profits for years and years and years. The same as I can extract positive feelings from that experience that I had in 1991. That's like the equivalent of 248.9 miles away. Does that make any sense? Can you get that image there? So that's a past success. So looking for your past successes and finding your past successes, this literally kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack, right? I mean, for example, that degree, when I got that degree, that's 1 inch in 248.9 miles. And yet it's a powerful memory for me. It's a powerful inch, right? Because I can extract that energy from it. So filling out that past successes list and meditating on your past successes, to me, it's one of the most powerful and valuable things that we can do.
I discovered this week that a goal is a future past success. So this whole thing centers around past successes.
Yes. So a goal is a future success.
Well, a goal is a future success, yes, but if you think of, okay, what do I want my past successes to be 6 months from now? And you list them as past successes, but yet you're in the, it's in the mind frame of, all right, it's 6 months from now. I want to list these things as past successes. I want to be this person, this type of person. In the frame mind, like you're already there. It's like you're already there and it's a goal, and of course you're going to accomplish that.
Right.
Anyway,
Well,
it's just, I think I overthought things, but
no. I think that's fantastic. So there's a part of you, shall we say, that will be there, experiencing that, right? So what do we call that?
I mean, your future time travel.
Yeah, that's your future self, right?
Hmm.
So your future self is you in that future situation, and you can connect with it right now. So this is something. This is something that. So that's great, Naomi. This is something that I was going to mention about mental time travel, because when Phil was talking last week, and you'll see it when you watch the video from last week, he was saying, okay, the way I understand it is, if I'm thinking of the past or a past success, I'm traveling in time. And I said, yeah, but it's not you that's traveling in time, it's a part of you, right? And the part of you is what I called the focus of your inner awareness, right? Which is a kind of a complicated phrase, the focus of your inner awareness. I mean, that's what I call it in my book, right? But you could also call it your past self. So what I realize is that we're always communicating with ourselves, right? Like when you think about that story that you just told me, Naomi, about making that decision to put your kids into that daycare. In a sense, you are connecting with the Naomi back then. So that's your past self. But I mean, I guess, to be more accurate, it's one of your past selves, because you have a bunch of them, right? Or maybe it's an aspect of your past self. If you think of your past self as kind of like a a jewel that's got a bunch of facets to it, that's one of the facets, right? Is that you that made
Right.
that decision back there, right? So, like for example, one of the reasons when I first had the idea to go to England and do some speaking in England, which I had the idea around about Christmas time. One of the thoughts I had was that's going to be a great experience to remember. Doing that, creating that trip out of nothing. So that's just like it's like a future past success. So that's a great way to think
True.
about it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to love to be there, man. I'm going to love being there and meeting these people, and feeling proud of myself for setting this up, and talking about it later too. Hey, look at this thing I just created, right? Created this trip to Europe. So so here's another spin on it. When I was 10 years old and I had that dream, part of the dream was I saw myself in the future getting, being a university professor. I saw myself marrying an Asian woman, or being married to an Asian woman, right? Well, now those are all in my past. Like I can remember the dream at 10 years old. I can remember getting my degree. I can remember getting married to the Asian woman, the little woman. So they're all part of my past, right? Now, here's a question that I haven't been able to resolve, but I'll lay it out for you guys. Maybe you can resolve it. Those events, getting my degree, having the dream, getting married to an Asian woman, those are all life events. some of my life events, right? They're all past life events now. But when I had the dream, getting married was a future event, and getting my degree was a future event, right? So getting married, getting a degree, they were in the future. Now, they weren't necessarily goals. I mean, certainly getting married to the Asian woman, that wasn't really a goal. It was just something I thought about. It became a goal later on, but I mean, it was just an idea, right? It was just a possibility, which I might have even considered to be an impossibility, actually, right? Getting the degree was a goal, and then it wasn't a goal, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and then finally I got it, you know. So that was a definite goal. So here's the question. Those three events, they're all a part of my consciousness, my mind, I would say. You know, the field, the mind field that is my experience here on this planet, right? Now, what would you call that? That cloud, that mind, that field of mind and time and experience, which has those three events in it. Is that my soul? Is that what they call the soul? I don't know. I mean, I heard about the soul when I was a kid, and I didn't have any concept of what the soul was, you know. I mean, they talk about the Holy Ghost too, right? Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Well, what's the ghost? That's a spirit or, something, right? I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, I learned it when I was a kid, but I didn't really have a way to think about it. So it's like, okay, so now here I am. I'm at the age I'm at now where I can remember getting married. That was 16 years ago we got married. I remember getting my degree. That was like 30 years ago. I remember that dream. That was 65 years ago. So it's almost like, okay, those are like stations on my train track, my timeline, right? I went through one at 10. I went through one at 1990, and then I went through one in 2006. But my mind somehow was aware of them when I was 10. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I don't have a word for it. My soul, maybe, my essence, my being, my consciousness, my awareness. Certainly they're in my mind now. But getting married, that was something I never really thought about. I had the dream. I thought about it then. It was just a part of the dream, And I never thought about it again until after we were married. And I kind of went, oh, wow, hey, look what just happened, Another one of those things that I saw that happened, Another thing that I saw in that dream was that I was going to do a one-man play. And so I'd given up on doing a one-man play because I didn't know how to do a one-man play. I thought, you have to be an actor, you have to have a play, you got to have a producer, you got to, it's a big complicated thing to do a one-man play, right? So I had never really thought about doing the one-man play until I went to a one-man play several years ago in Vancouver, and when I saw this person doing a one-man play, I went, hey, I could do that. Because I'd been doing workshops and seminars for 20 years at that point, right, or more. So for me to stand in front of a room full of people and talk, that was easy. So for the first time, I realized, hey, that's a one-man play. Now, when I went to see the play, I didn't realize it was a one-man play. All I knew was it was a play that I heard about, that I wanted to go see, because I was interested in the subject matter. So I went to see the play, and I didn't realize until I got there, hey, it's just one guy standing on the stage talking. So after the play, I went to this guy and I said to him, how do I get to do what you do? And he said, apply to the Fringe Festival. Boom. You know, never thought about that. Totally blanked on the whole thing. I mean, I had heard the word Fringe Festival for years, didn't know what it was. Never been to a Fringe Festival, right? And so I applied to a Fringe Festival and I got accepted. And this is another thing. This is what the guy told me, right? He said, the reason I do most of my work at the Fringe Festival is because when I was studying acting, I was so afraid of rejection, I didn't want to apply to do any acting roles. But he said, when you apply to the Fringe Festival, they draw everybody out of a hat, literally. It's just the luck of the draw. There's nobody accepts you or rejects you. They just pick your name out of a hat, and if they pick your name, you're in, and if they don't pick your name, you're not in. So I thought, man, that's perfect. So I applied to a couple of Fringe Festivals, and the third time I applied, I think I got in. So I did my one-man play. So there was an experience. There was something that I had in that dream at 10 years old that was like, oh yeah, one of these days I'm going to do a one-man play. And I never thought about it again, probably for, well, when did I do it? I was 70, right? 70 something. So 60 years went by, and suddenly I realized, oh, hey, I can do it now. Right? So I got one more slide I want to show you here. I'm going to share this. Now, I was talking to Kathy just before, I think before you arrived, Phil. And she was talking about memory. She said, your memory's way better than mine. I can't remember a lot of stuff. Well, I don't think my memory's any better than anybody else's, except I've trained it, a little bit, right? But I said, I was going through these slides that I prepare for these various sessions that we do on Saturday. And I came across this one slide and I couldn't even remember putting it together. So this is the slide. So I'm gonna share it with you here. So so here is the slide, right? Carl Jung's idea of the future self. The Swedish psychologist Carl Jung proposed a very intriguing idea to the phenomena of the future self. In his theory, your future self already exists. That future version of you is trying to manifest itself in the present moment by directing your attention towards things of interest. It stands to reason that your interests are ultimately what you become if you focus on them. So, whenever you are drawn or deeply attracted to something in your daily life, it could be your future self trying to come alive in the here and now. Now, isn't that brilliant?
That's pretty deep.
I like that.
Yes. Now, I forgot that I even put that slide there. I talked about it, a year ago or something, 8 months ago. I can't even remember now. I'm not sure what session it was in. But when I was looking at these slides yesterday, I came across that one and I thought, hey, that's perfect. Because, there's two comments that I can make that would apply to that exactly, right? And one is the story I mentioned. I've mentioned it a few times, but I'll mention it again. Michael Jordan, his parents took him to a basketball game when he was a kid, and he said, hey, I want to do that. I want to be a professional basketball player. And a lot of actors, when you hear them talking about how they got interested in acting, that's what they say. I went to a movie when I was a kid, and I looked at the screen and I thought, oh man, that's what I want to do. So in other words, you see something and it causes kind of a spark in you, and you go, wow, Now, Joseph Campbell, one of his oft quoted lines is follow your bliss. So to me, that's the same thing, right? It's like when I first had the idea, hey, wouldn't it be nice to go to Europe this year and to do a bit of a, visit England and do a bit of a tour, do some public speaking maybe, my first thought was kind of like, how much is it going to cost? Can I do it? Blah, blah, all this stuff, right? All these obstacles. COVID, came up. But then I thought, well, wait a second. How much fun would it be? And I thought, man, that would really be fun. So I said, okay, let's do it. I'm going to do it, right? So now it's like it's coming true. I mean, I got people that are waiting for me. I sent a bunch of books today from Amazon.uk to these people that are organizing some workshops for me in England, so they could sell the books, so they could pass the books out, to people. So that's, follow your bliss, right? You think of something and you go, wouldn't that be great, to do that, right? Or I could do that, like when I saw that guy doing his one-man play, it was like the light bulb went on in my head. It was like, whoa, I can do that. And when he said, apply to the Fringe Festival, it was like, wow, that's it? It's that easy? So I thought, so I applied to the Fringe Festival. I didn't get in. So I applied to another one. I didn't get in. I applied to the third one, and I got an email back and said, hey, you're in. So I thought, oh, I better write that one-man play now. So that's when I wrote my one-man play, right? Confessions of a Time Traveler. Have you seen it, Phil?
No, I haven't.
It's a classic, man. It's soon to be a major motion picture. I
So
will.
there's a video of it?
Yes, I'll send you a link to it.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Have you seen it, Naomi?
No.
I'll send you a link.
No. Okay.
I have.
Oh, you have? Okay, good. Yeah, it was a thrill to do that, right? And I've done it a few times. I've done it in 3 different cities now. Matter of fact, I might even do it in England, but that'll be a thrill. I could do it on Broadway. Hey.
That could be your in England. That could be your grand finale. You've done all these other events, right? And then you're inviting people to that one-man play at the end.
Right. That's a great idea. By the way, this week I got 2 different emails from 2 different people, one of whom I have no idea how he even heard about me. But both of them are film producers, and they want to know if I'm interested in having my story turned into a film.
Wow.
Now that's a thought that's
cool.
That's a thought that's been in my mind for years. As a matter of fact, if you look at my one-man play, when I did my one-man play, and I filmed it, one of the things I put across the screen like a subtitle was soon to be a major motion picture. And who knows?
Right up there with that, with my dinner with Andre.
Yeah, that's right. My dinner with Antoine. Yeah. So now that we are talking about this is probably a good point for me to bring this other point up, which I'm not sure if I've mentioned this or not, but I'll mention it now. That quote I just read by Carl Jung. He said, when you feel some kind of a spark, when you see something and you feel kind of a spark, it might be your future self communicating with you saying, hey, I want to become real now. Right? So
that gives me warm and fuzzies when I think about that.
yeah, well, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because this is what I've experienced in my life. We're so indoctrinated and we're so brainwashed, I guess, is maybe one way to think about it, with this idea of a goal of something in the future, right? Because we travel from the past to the present into the future. So when we think about a goal, we think about from Newton's mechanical view of the universe, I think. We think, okay, what do I have to do to make this thing happen? That was my first thought when I had this thing about going to England, right? I thought, what do I have to do to bring that about, right? Well, another way to look at it is the Carl Jung way. In other words, hey, this thing that I'm thinking of that I call a dream or a goal or an intention or a possibility, right? What if it's calling to me and what I really have to do is get out of the way, get myself out of the way, get my ego out of the way, let it in, right? Let it into my life. And that is one of the 3 principles of the law of attraction. I'm a certified law of attraction trainer, and the person who certified me and trained me is a guy named Michael Lozier. He wrote a book called Law of Attraction, which is a great book. I'd highly recommend it. He says, to get the law of attraction working for you, there's 3 things you have to do. You have to decide what you want. Number 2, you focus your mental energy on it. Your intention, you visualize it, you think about it, you affirm it, you expect it, you work towards it, you start writing down ideas about it. And the 3rd one is you let it in. In other words, accept it. Let it happen.
Can I say something?
Absolument.
Okay. Yeah, when you first started talking about this, before you talked about the law of attraction, I'm thinking about this future self, this goal, whatever I have in my mind about, what I want to become or be. And it feels like the image I had in my head was, it feels like it's on the horizon. Okay, so it's on the horizon in the direction of, say, the east. Okay, so my mental picture is about, okay, I'm going to start walking east. I'm going to create some activity that I think is, going to lead to that. But what happens, what seems to happen for me is that I walk east, say I walk east a mile, 2 miles, whatever distance, and that future self is still on the horizon. It's just that it's on the horizon from where I'm standing, those miles east. So it's always out there somewhere, but pulling me, or that's the direction I think I'm trying to go. But I'm still here, and it's still out there.
Right. Well, that's typical. That happens to all of us, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
And so the way to bring it in, the way to bring it into your life, is to step into it, to feel that it's happening right now. And that's just a contemplation exercise, right? So in other words, what you can do, I mean, you can do this physically. Anthony Robbins talks about this. I talk about it. A lot of people talk about it. You kind of imagine yourself in that situation, and then you just literally you step into it. You can do it physically. You can kind of walk across the room. You can pick a place on the floor, right? Matter of fact, this is a great exercise. Just pick a spot on the floor and say, that's where I'm going to manifest this future self experience, right? Whatever the goal happens to be. And then walk over there, and then when you're in that spot, just kind of let it in. So, okay, here it is. This is it. And so in NLP terms, they call that being associated. Whereas being disassociated is you imagine it as though it's somebody else doing it, right? Oh yeah, it's on the horizon. I can see that Phil out there, a couple miles away. So just imagine that you're in that person's body now. You just get in the body, whoosh, And one of the things that I used to do when I was doing my workshops and public speaking as a full-time thing was I would set up a talk the same as I'm doing this now in England, because now I can't not do it, right? It's like one of the reasons that Jess and I set this thing up here on Saturday, because every Saturday we do it. It's like we can't not do it now because people are expecting us to do it, right? You show up, Naomi shows up, Greg shows up, Kathy shows up, So when you set something up, then you have to show up. Otherwise, you feel like a jerk. It's like you make an appointment, and if you don't show, then you feel like a jerk. So, but yeah, that's a great point, Phil. So it's important to recognize that there's two ways to imagine something. One is as though it's happening to somebody else, and the other way is as though it's happening to you right now. And that's where your ego can get in the way, because if you're not careful, your mind will go, and you remember the explainer, right? We talked about the explainer last week. The explainer is going to say, well, you're not quite ready yet. You need more education. You need to take another course. You need to read another book. So
you need to watch another inspirational video about with the company that I'm
That's right. You need I'm not fill in the blank yet, right? I'm not ready yet.
I'm getting ready to get ready.
That's right. I'm not ready yet. I'm getting ready. So yeah, that can be a real trap, and I'm guilty of that myself. Putting things off, and then maybe not even doing it.
Yeah.
So like when I got accepted for that one-man play, it was in Nanaimo, the first one, and they put posters out, they advertised it, they promoted it on the internet. I had to show up. And so when I got there, I walked out and there was an audience there because they had set it up, right? If I had to set it up myself, I might have put it off and put it off and put it off and maybe never done it. But because there was somebody else organizing it, they did it. I was just a part of it, I just had to show up and do it. So that's a great point. So that's something that you need to learn, or that we need to learn, is we need to learn to feel that it's happening right now. I'm right there right now.
I need to go soon.
Yes, time to hit the trail. So thanks very much, Naomi, for sharing that experience with us.
Thank you.
And thanks for being here, Phil. And thanks, Jessica, and for inviting your friend too.
It's instructional for me to get over my father guilt.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay.
All
See
right.
you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
For more information about this online community, to get your own copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, either the ebook, the paperback, or the audiobook, go to mindtimeandpower.com, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook.